A very good evening and welcome to the EndGame here on Awake Radio and Shaziz and other networks that might be carrying it. This is the EndGame. I learned my lessons the hard way. We're going to be having 2 hours of talk, truth, opinion, and some great music as well. So, we get into the truth of the matter, the truth of the world around us. I hope you're well, hope you've had a good week. If you want to get in touch with me then, possibly the best thing to do is go along to awakeradio.co.uk or awakeradio.us. And join in the Awake Radio chat. It's there on the screen, right in front of you, right in the centre of things. And there, just for you, you can see you can see what other people are talking about, other people's opinions, views, and that's what's important. What you say, what's important to you, your opinion counts. Thanks to Neil for the last 2 hours and the G. Edward Griffin interview. That man really does know his stuff and he really is speaking the truth, and that's something that I like to try and do always. I would do my best to check my facts before I speak about them. I'm going to be playing an interview that I did sometime in the middle of last year about Atos, because Neil was talking about it on his show, and he was talking about how Atos are collecting data, gathering big data, and I wanted to share an interview that I'd done and let you hear the experiences of some campaigners and some people that were actually going through the system at that time. It'll just give you an idea of what it's like to be assessed, to have your capabilities assessed by this French company Atos. It's a fascinating interview, which I will play for you later on. A couple of stories that came up that Neil talked about that I wanted to pass comment on. Independent.co.uk. Let disabled workers build a £43 billion HS2. You what? Excuse me? Are you sure? I mean, come on, really? How are they going to do that? Now, my wife is registered disabled. She has acute arthritis and various other complications which limit her mobility, limit her activity levels, and also limit her emotionally. And when I spoke to her about this, I went through and I spoke to her, and she said to me, well, they can go forth and multiply. But then she asked the question, what are they going to do with all the people that, if this was to be put in place, because at the moment it's only been put forward by an industry lobbying group, but we know what these industry lobbying groups are like. They're very, very powerful people. And she said, well, what's going to happen to those that refuse? And as Neil said, well, your money will be stopped. Any benefits that you're entitled to will be stopped because you've refused work. And because you've got no money, you won't be able to buy food, so you'll need to go somewhere else. And you'll need to be taken off to possibly the G4S or Serco-run camps that will suddenly spring up, and they'll suddenly appear out of nowhere. Of course, we know that here in the UK there are numerous military camps, Army, Navy, and Air Force that are mothballed. They weren't closed. They were simply mothballed, put into hibernation, and they can be very quickly set up to contain vast numbers of people. These camps were, of course, developed with lots and lots of security, physical security put in place already to keep people out Well, it doesn't take very much, if anything at all, to ensure that those same security procedures, that same physical security is put in place to keep people in. You can be re-educated, fed, and any medical treatment that they deem you worthy to undergo to keep you working, I suppose. Well, it's all there in one place. Having spent 11 years previously up until 2010 living in and around these bases, I know that all the facilities are there. I know the capabilities, and obviously that's going to make me a threat and dangerous, because if you put me in one of these places, I'll know where all the weak points are and I'll know how to disable them, won't I? Because, hey, I was a policeman and I worked in security, physical and IT, so I know my way around them. So I'm going to be dangerous. So do you think they're going to put me in one of those? No, I don't think so. There'll be somewhere else for people like me. Because as we've been hearing from the US, returning veterans are seen as a potential threat to internal and homeland security. And procedures are put in place and training is put in place with local police and the military guard and the military to deal with these people, to deal with the veterans and those that hold out and have got their own food and etc., etc. Want to find out more about that? Well, there's lots of places you can go on the web to find out about those people. But, so let's go back to this independent.co.uk report. Let disabled workers build the £43 billion HS2. £43 billion. I'll just want you to let that figure sink in for a moment. £43 billion. What could you do with £43 billion? What could you do for a country? You could provide every single person with a completely energy-sustaining and energy-generating home. Not just a house, not just a property, but a home. Solar panels, a little wind turbine, all the bits, and every single home could be energy independent. With a little garden out the back where you could grow your own food. Oh, maybe somewhere to keep some chickens so you get your own eggs and protein, and maybe somewhere for a little goat. Everybody could have it and be completely self-sustaining. But instead, they're going to use that £43 billion to chop a whole 10 minutes off the journey between Birmingham and London. This is what the Independent said. The physically disabled, the unemployable, not the unemployed, but the unemployable, and even former prisoners should build the £42.6 billion high-speed 2 railway, according to a powerful new industry lobby group. Jim Steer, chief executive of the high-speed rail industry leaders group, said that HS2 chairman Sir David Higgins should learn from France, which used nearly 1,000 disadvantaged people to build the Rhine-Rhone line. You know, the Fukushima nuclear industry disaster, they were using down-and-out, homeless, mentally disabled people to clear that up as well, and they still are shipping them in from across Japan, taking them off the streets, putting them in a boiler suit with helmets, and giving them some work to do, moving highly dangerous radioactive fuel rods, and if 2 of them touch, then that's it. Goodbye, Japan. And they're putting this in the hands of the mentally ill, the alcoholics, down and outs, etc. Because, hey, they're cheap and expendable. But then we're all expendable. The high-speed railway opened in late 2011, cutting the journey from Paris to Zurich by 30 minutes, a similar amount of time that HS2 would carve off the commute from London to Birmingham. It's not 30 minutes, actually, it's about 10 minutes. Mr. Steer said, in building HS2, we've got to look to a better all-round policy, not just economic, but socially as well. A good precedent for this is the Rhine-Rhone line, built and completed in France, where 12% of the workforce were expressly recruited from disadvantaged groups. These included the previously unemployed, the so-called unemployable, the physically disadvantaged, people with some kind of criminal record. There is more than enough time to the scheduled start of laying HS2's tracks in 2017 to ensure there are wider social benefits from the construction phase of the project. Don't forget as well that the Chinese are coming in to bail out HS2 and ensure that it goes ahead. So they're putting a lot of money in. So maybe some of the Chinese work ethic will be used in the UK, such as not allowing breaks for members of staff and making them sit on commodes whilst they build iPads and iPhones. And chaining up their children outside because there is no place or money for childcare, so we'll just pop a little chain or strap around them and fasten them to a lamppost outside the little sweatshop or factory. And also we don't want these workers getting pregnant because that means time off, so we'll have a small abortion clinic in the factory as well. And we need to put some nets up to stop people jumping off the roofs, because we can't have them committing suicide, because that would mean a slowdown in the project. Mr. Steer's words carry weight as his organisation is backed by some of the biggest rail engineers and operators in international transport. They include US giant Bechtel, Germany's Siemens, Kilos from France, and London's stock exchange listed group WS Atkins, while Alstom, Bombardier and Hitachi are thought to be close to joining the membership list. Mr. Steer was once a senior figure in the Strategic Rail Authority, and his comments come at an opportune moment given the bizarre diplomatic row that blew up between France and the UK last week. Responding to an article in the City AM financial newspaper that criticised France for a generalised hatred of commerce, the French embassy lambasted the quality of the NHS. This in turn resulted in an angry rebuttal from Jeremy Hunt, the Health Secretary. I bet they were quaking in their boots. The focus on skills also comes after HS2 announced the creation of a £20 million college to train a generation of world-class engineers. Now, actually that's to train a world-class generation of drones who will learn how to make trains go fast along bits of metal and not a lot else. There have been fears that the UK does not have enough top-drawer engineers to build a vast new railway that could eventually link the capital to Scotland. Hold on just one cotton-picking moment. Not enough top-drawer engineers? Railways. Which particular country built those first? And I know that we shouldn't dip into history like that, but I'm going to. You know, we are smart, we are bright, we are intelligent, we're human beings, and God damn it, we could build this thing without anybody else's help. But of course, we have to have international investment and involvement, don't we? Just looking at the chat box here briefly. Let's just quickly go here. One dock instead of two, an immediate 50% cost saving. They can pump you full of toxic vaccines and drugs. That's right, yes. So a woman's husband is having an affair and decides to get rid of the wife to make room for the new lady and reports her as mentally ill. She goes off her trolley and with anger and is sectioned. Yes, and it's not difficult to do that. Police officer can do that these days if they deem that the person is a danger to themselves or others and is mentally deficient. Well, it's off to the ward with you. Lovely. Oh, and yes, we'll get fluoridated as well. And I'm just sort of, I've just been going through a bit of a detox recently by getting rid of fluoride from my system, because I now live in a house which is served by a well, and obviously that won't be allowed by the state. So you can't possibly have an independent water source which comes straight from the aquifer and isn't artificially fluoridated anyway. Doesn't have anything else added to it before I drink it. Don't lose temper in front of anyone else, quite rightly said. And lithium in the water if they get their way. That's right. And of course, don't forget, with the vast quantity of hormones that people are taking these days, whether it be male hormone, female hormone, birth control hormone, don't forget that's all ending up in the water system as well. So we're all getting a really good dose of birth control and estrogen and everything else that goes through our systems, because the antidepressants that people are taking now in massive quantities, and yes, the BPA that's in the plastics that will damage your system. I managed to find a water bottle which is BPA free, and I'm quite lucky in that respect. And I've got filters. They're not the Alex Jones filters. They're not the big sort of ceramic things and all that kind of thing. Bisphenol A, that's right. Thank you very much. Cheers, Mr. Reality Bites. That's great. But I filter my water, even though I don't really have to, because after 3 years I've not had any difficulty with the water. But that aside, with all that stuff that's going into the water system, I mean, this is why the Russians developed their pain device, and I'm trying to remember the name of it. I've heard somebody talking about it on Reality Bites, and I've looked it on the website. It's gone. It'll come to me though eventually. Well, they developed this device anyway, which uses electric pulses to deal with pain, because when they sent the cosmonauts into space, if they were all taking painkillers, or one of them was taking painkillers or any kind of drug, then everybody would get some, because obviously they recycle the water. And that's not very good. So this system, which I'm desperately trying to remember the name of, this system was developed anyway by the Russian Space Agency, and they use that now, and it is available here on Earth, but it's a case of finding one, being able to afford it, and then of course using it at your own risk. Right, I did promise you some good music, didn't I? It's not all talk and it's not all bad news, so bit of B.B. King. What? Mr. B.B. King, Don't Have to Cry. I couldn't talk over the end of him. It's B.B. King. There'll be some more blues coming up later on from Blind Boy Fuller. I love all the old Delta blues. It's fantastic. Anyway, okay, let's get back to some of the other news. Now, following on from the disability story that I was just talking about, let the disabled build the HS2. Now, once again, Neil was talking about Atos, and that prompted me to bring up this chat and interview that I did on another show. From, like I say, I think from last year. So I want to play you this, and this is about Atos and an experience that we had meeting with campaigners and then actually attempting to talk to Atos in Norwich. I'm joined right from the start by Dee Dee. Good evening, Dee Dee.
Good evening.
Lovely to have you along. Dee Dee's here for a short time right at the very start of the show because we went to a protest, didn't we?
Yes, in Norwich.
In Norwich. We've been to a few, but this is the most recent one, and it was for a particular group of people who are demonstrating against the government's disability policy and Atos, which carry out the work related examinations and tests, isn't it?
Their version, yeah.
Yeah. So these work assessment tests are supposed to be it's a medically trained person. It's not so much a doctor, is it?
No, not fully qualified. What I've seen, no.
No. Anyway, there's a demonstration outside the Atos office in Norwich, and we went along. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to play you a couple of interviews, and that we did whilst we were there from the protesters. Now, I did approach Atos for a statement, and they didn't put anybody forward, but they gave me a written statement, which I've recorded. So, without further ado, let's crack on, and then indeed you'll have a little chat about what we saw and what our feelings are about Atos and the protests that we went to. I'm outside the hub in Norwich here, which is the home of Atos in Norwich. Tell me, why are you here today?
Two reasons. One is because Atos are the mercenaries who carry out the government's work capability assessments, which are discriminating against disabled people and ruining their lives. And secondly, because, strange as it may be seen, the Atos, as the agency that is there to assess disabled people's needs, are in a building that wheelchair users can't get into because we're seen as a fire hazard.
Seems a little bit ironic.
You could say that, but if you look at the Atos website, it tells you that 20% of their offices are inaccessible to wheelchair users, and 10% of those are in buildings that are owned by the Department of Work and Pensions.
But aren't all government buildings supposed to be accessible?
That's what you would think. They're breaking their own equality legislation.
And what's the other reason you're here today?
Well, because the work capability assessments are completely inappropriate. They only are designed to get people off benefits. Atos have targets set by the DWP in their contract to get people off the benefits, as the dispatches and the Panorama programmes showed. Of course, the government ministers deny it, and so do Atos, but we don't believe them.
But Atos work to government guidelines, is that right?
Yeah, they're set by the DWP. No, Atos isn't the problem. They're just the mercenaries who make huge profits off the back of disabled people. The real problem is the government.
So what do you want to achieve today, Mark?
Well, we're sending a message. We're sending a message to the government that it's not acceptable. The plan is that we will come here every month until Atos move out of their offices into accessible offices, and until the government scrap the work capability assessment and replace it with something that's actually not discriminatory and not targeting disabled people in the most unfair way.
That's a big commitment to come here every month.
Well, you have to realise that disabled people are losing their lives. You know, you've seen the posters. Every week, Atos assess people as being fit for work, and then they die before they actually get their benefits, because they're assessing people with cancer as fit for work who are in terminal stages of illness. So these are life and death questions. So it's a small commitment, I think, to come here once a month and demonstrate.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm a journalist. I've just been taking photographs of the people outside. Is there anybody that can speak to me?
Hold on a second.
All right, thank you.
She's just gonna see who you need to speak to, alright? So if you want to take a seat, and she'll come back in a second.
All right, okay.
Alright.
Because the guy downstairs said it's the third floor, but when we got into the lift, it only went up to the second floor. Yeah. Okay. I was looking at the tall woman, you know. Gents are on the bottom.
Gents are on the ground floor. And ladies are
We're on
spread between
first and
first and second floor.
This is a government building,
Yes.
and the government is supposed to have an accessibility policy. I used to be in the military,
Yeah.
and up until 2010,
Yeah.
I think we're putting ramps into the military camps because of this accessibility
Yeah.
policy.
There's
So you
ramps
go
and
to-
lifts everywhere,
well, yeah,
aren't
Go
there?
to RAF camps, there's
Yeah,
ramps and
that's right. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
everywhere else
smells.
but these places now.
Yeah.
They get away with it because they're dumb. Tell you, that's one rule for some and another rule for others. Don't do as we do, do as we say.
Yeah,
That's the
sort
old
of
story.
thing.
yeah.
Typical.
So you've been for one of these assessments before then?
Yeah. Once.
Right.
But I don't know why I've been called up. As I say, I'm 60, I'm now 62, and I retire at 65.
Right.
I've been on this game for 10 years.
Gosh.
You know, and they still call me out. I went on a community programme for 10 years.
Right.
I became an area supervisor,
Right.
and then I found I couldn't do it anymore, and they shot me off.
Well, he's
So-
had polio.
You know, I had poliomyelitis when I was young.
Wow.
Yeah, that's me.
Okay. One day done.
Yeah, I'll be all right.
It's obvious that he's in no fit state. He's been battling with it for 10 years. It's amazing, incredible.
I'll have to go with myself.
Okay.
I've got a number to look on phone. Okay, it's our press office.
Right.
If you want to give them a ring, they'll be able to.
All right.
contact them.
Okay.
Promise you have, all right.
Thanks very much.
There you go.
Cheers.
Atos sent me the following statement. We do not write or design the assessment descriptors, criteria or claim forms for benefit. All this is done by the DWP. We do not make decisions on individuals' entitlement to benefit. This is done by a DWP decision maker. The information from the assessment which we send to the DWP forms only one piece of the evidence the DWP decision maker will use when making a decision on benefits. The contract with DWP was first awarded in 1998, renewed for 7 years in 2005 and extended for 3 years in 2010 through to 2015. The contract with Atos Healthcare contains no targets or expected range or distribution of advice to decision makers with assessment outcomes. Atos Healthcare will not be aware of the benefit decision made by the DWP. DWP decision makers are able to send assessments back to Atos Healthcare to rework before making a decision on benefits. This happens in 0.1% of cases. The MOJ recently published statistics showing that only 0.3% of successful appeals were successful because the medical or functional assessment reports relied on by DWP decision makers contained errors. Norwich is a government building. We let people know about access prior to scheduled appointments to ensure no one goes to a centre that they cannot access. We are working with the DWP to ensure there is appropriate access at all sites used and hope that this will be the case shortly. An Atos Healthcare spokesperson said, "We fully respect people's rights to peaceful protest and understand that applying for benefit can be a difficult experience. We do not make decisions on people's benefit entitlement or on welfare policy, but we continually strive to make sure that the service that we provide is as highly professional and compassionate as it can be."
1800 online.
Okay, so there we go. That was the full. We got a couple of interviews from a gentleman who identified himself as Martin, who was part of the protest outside. I believe that he was a claimant as well.
Yeah, he was walking the
then-
canes, I think he was.
Yeah, and then an elderly couple who in their 60s who wanted to remain anonymous, hence the beeping of the name. But the gentleman was about to go in for yet another work capability assessment. Just tell us a little bit more about what you thought about that couple, Dee Dee.
They're a very sweet couple. They arrived on electric scooters because obviously their mobility was quite poor. And then to actually access the building, you had to go down a flight of 3-4 steps and then back up another 3-4 steps to the lift. I mean, my mobility's not as bad as theirs, and I struggled with that. You know, and they're both walking with canes, and then obviously you have to go up the lift, very small lift, mind. So to the floor, then obviously wait to go and be done to one of these so-called assessments. I personally haven't had one of them done as yet, but there's a possibility I might have to because my mobility's got worse, and I'm in the process of getting my DLA re-looked at because of this. I've been appealing against their decision for over a year now, but it's just waiting game.
It's waiting, isn't it?
And they're using evidence what I gave to them before my mobility got worse.
Yeah. Because you had a reassessment at the beginning of 2012, didn't you?
Yeah.
And
that's when my mobility got worse, and when I had the arthritis developed into my lower spine.
And, I mean, they clearly wrote in a letter, they sort of said, we've re-looked at your case based on evidence received from yourself dated 2011. It was January 2011 they were using.
Yeah.
So, first of all, the information they were using was a year out of date.
Yeah. Back then my arthritis only in my hands, but now it's in all of my joints.
Yeah. And I know there are other related conditions, but the main issue for you now is mobility.
Yeah.
And it seems to be that they
seem to ignore.
They seem, you know,
they know I need care during the day due to obviously having arthritis and carpal tunnel in my hands. That obviously I can't cook or prepare meals and have difficulty getting dressed. They've taken that into consideration, and I do get care component, but they still don't acknowledge the mobility side of things, where my hips, knees, ankles and 6 of my lower discs of my back are riddled with arthritis, and I'm in a lot of pain. I'm on very strong painkillers, and even then I'm still in pain.
And I mean, all this information has gone to the DWP, and it's all been backed up by medical reports from consultants and GPs.
All the consultants I see, as well as my GP. And even a letter from my social worker.
I'm going to say, and other agencies as well. But with regards to the couple that we met briefly there at the Atos in Norwich,
I think it was absolutely disgusting that the fact they had to go through that, and it was obvious he was quite frail, even though he was only 62. And the fact he had polio as a child, and it was very obviously he was disabled.
He walked with a stick from the chair to the assessment, didn't he?
To the assessment door when we last saw them,
and I did notice that he got displaced hips, hadn't he?
Yeah.
Which means his legs weren't straight up and down, you know.
No,
sort of
they were very bowed and very severe limping, and he basically shuffled with a cane.
Yeah. And you know, he was being called back for this. And,
another assessment apparently, but he's been doing this for 10 years apparently. Since obviously his condition deteriorated. Yeah,
and he didn't know why being called in. It just has a letter. He's got to go for this work assessment. There's not been any change in his circumstances.
He's not going to be going to work, is he?
No. There'd not been any change in his circumstances. There'd not been, as far as he knew, there was nothing. You know, nothing had improved or anything. And
well, no, it probably got worse if it's anything like mine.
Yeah, so for some unknown reason, a government agency has a right to drag you in and...
He's been battling with this condition for the last 10 years, and obviously trying to claim benefits to help. It's obvious that his condition's not going to ever improve. And when they're in the early 60s, are they really going to go out to work?
Who's going to employ him?
Exactly. You know, even
if it's difficult to get a job if you're unemployed in your 40s, let alone, you know...
If you're in your 60s and you're disabled, you've got no chance.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm only in my early 30s and disabled, and I can't go back to work now because my health just won't tolerate for any more than 10 minutes of standing or sitting in one place.
Now, you see, I'm going to play devil's advocate here, right? And, you know, whilst I'm fully aware of all your
conditions.
All your conditions and everything. Somebody looking at this from the outside would say, okay, you have these physical issues, but there's still work you can do.
Okay, what can you do when you can't stand or hold anything in your hands? You can't bend, lift, carry. I can't use computers because of my hands.
Right.
The pain in my wrist.
Right.
So you tell me what line of work I could do. And I've always worked. It's only in last 2 years since my health deteriorated. I gave out work, and I've worked solidly since I left school for 20 years. In between, obviously, having children, but
yeah. Now, you see, what I found interesting was the protesters outside, whilst there were a number of disabled people, and I've got photographs from the day, which I will be putting in a blog post, the address for which I'll announce later. It's going to be on WordPress anyway. If you look for me on there, on WordPress, you'll find me. I think it's called Alan's blog or something like that. I can't remember, to be honest, just off the top of my head. But I'll be putting pictures on there, and I'll be doing a little write-up about it, to support the interview that you heard. The thing I found interesting was that most of the people outside, whilst there were disabled people there, some people in wheelchairs and scooters and stuff like that, the vast majority were able-bodied, young, and were holding socialist worker papers, and seemed to be from sort of other sort of groups, and
but
there seemed to be some professional campaigners there, if you know what I mean.
Well, that's quite common at demos. With all the ones we've done, it's quite common. You do have a mixture of people who do tag along, regardless what the cause is, to put their point in.
I mean, my initial thought is, well, that's just rent-a-mob.
I don't think they really were rent-a-mob, the ones what we saw, compared to some of the ones we have been to. They seemed quite genuine.
Well, the one outside Nick Clegg's house.
The one we did in London, that was very different.
Yeah, that was last year in the summer, wasn't it? Very hot day, that.
Oh, God, it was scorching. I think everybody fried that day.
And the group UK Uncut basically said, turn up at these 6 locations in London, and we're going to go somewhere. And they didn't release the destination.
No.
The police didn't know.
There
was only one. There was one person at every location
who knew where we were
that
going.
knew where we were ending up, and we went on a tour of the underground, and then we ended up at was it Waterloo?
Yeah.
Or was it?
We went onto Waterloo onto a main train line.
That's right. We ended up on a mainline train at Waterloo,
and then we went out to.
And we'd only got like all zone travel cards, aren't we? So we're like, where are we going on this train with these travel cards? And we ended up at Nick Clegg's house for the day.
Yeah, we had a street party. It was good fun.
Yeah. And the police joined in.
Well, yeah, they were quite good.
Eventually. There was a little bit of rough and tumble at the start, weren't there?
Well, yeah, because obviously they were trying to stop people getting near the house,
but they failed.
But then they realised it was going to be just a peaceful one, and we were just sat there sharing
because
food
there were
and
kids
water.
There, and there was food.
Yeah, they were sat doing hopscotch on the road,
drinks, and
the neighbours.
A street party. It was really nice.
And even the neighbours of the road came out and gave us water and said, we fully support what you're doing. And they obviously lived in a very affluent area of London, and they fully supported where we were.
Sorry, I've just had a drink of water, and for somehow I've managed to spill it all down myself.
Because you're on mucky pot.
Yeah. So, okay, let's get back to Norwich. Your initial thought, your final thoughts about what you saw, what you heard, the people that you met.
My initial final thoughts, I think I really feel for that, obviously, elderly couple, that they shouldn't be going through this time of their life. They should be able to be comfortable and enjoy the little life they obviously probably got left. And I fully support the rest of the people who are outside, because obviously I'm, in the process of going through this, I've got arthritis as well as other conditions. And I know that I'm going to come across this at some point in the future. And I'm so glad that there's people out there, backing us up in some respect, sort of supporting our corners, like this sort of stuff shouldn't be happening.
Yeah.
People, like they said, terminally ill people, and children, and even children getting denied benefits and etc. Dying of cancer and strokes and all kinds of things. It's just
Well, it's like Martin
puts my
said.
Things into comparison, yes, my conditions are quite bad, but when you're terminally ill with cancer, there's nothing you can beat that. That is the most horrendous thing you could ever have.
Well, it's like Martin said at the very beginning of the interview there, that there are people that are coming for assessments, are being, who have these terminal illnesses,
well, yeah,
are being told they're fit for work. And then and are dying before they get their benefit.
I know. I did see some of that program he was talking about, and it was quite hard to watch. About these terminally ill people, and then he announced it at the end. So unfortunately, before the decision was made, this poor gentleman died. That is so wrong. It shouldn't be happening this time.
I mean, to me, the only people that should be doing a medical assessment on a person
is professional medical people, doctors, consultants, etc.
Is the person's GP.
Yeah.
What the DWP should be doing is writing to the person's GP.
Don't understand because we've been there for ourselves. They don't have the time to look at all the medical records, reference, etc. And then it's like, how can you diagnose somebody fit for work if you don't actually understand the background of somebody's medical history? Or
so you've got somebody who is medically qualified, and that could mean anything. That could mean anything. We're not talking about doctors and nurses. It could mean anything.
No.
Who is then seeing you for a very, very short time.
It's only a few minutes you're in there.
It's 20 minutes or something like that, is it?
If that.
And then they're writing a report quickly on a computer before they see the next person, and then sending that off to some faceless administrator in an office somewhere who reads that and says, oh, well, that's only 13 points and you need 15 to get benefit.
And people can't bend, lift, or, barely stand. And they're saying, oh, no, you're fine. You
can go to work.
Yeah, I mean, I know my dad's been through it yourself.
See, as far as I can see, and it's a much cheaper option, it's much simpler, is the DWP receives your application for benefits, they write a letter to your GP, and they say
your full history and know exactly what you're going through.
And on your application form, there's a bit there that says, I give you authority to approach my GP who can release my records.
To what's necessary for you to see,
And then they write to your GP and say, can you tell us about this person, send us the details, here's the authorization.
Exactly.
And then they send it off, and then you get a proper full medical report on the person by somebody who actually knows them.
Whereas we know ourselves, I have done that, sent medical stuff out to DWP, and obviously it's been refused.
It just gets ignored, doesn't it?
But like I say, I know it probably will be more work for GPs, but I'm sure you speak to 9 times out of 10 GPs, they will
Well, that's why they have administrators and stuff like that.
Yeah, they will happy do that because they know what their patients are going through.
Yeah. And it should, for the actual GP themselves, it should be a case of, right, there's a letter, I'll have a quick look at that. Yes, I'll authorise that.
X, Y, Z of his medical records.
That gets passed on to their administration team, who say, right, thank you very much. Yeah, we'll send them off.
Yeah, send what's relevant. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Dee Dee. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Okay. Thank you.
And come and sit in this cold studio.
Yeah, I'm going back into the warmer room.
Okay, take care. Thank you. So Dee Dee joined me there for a chat about the demonstration that we went to with regards to Atos and their work assessment, workability.
Blind Boy Fuller with Bull City Red, trucking my blues away. Do you know, I'm going to keep the blues feel going through the next hour as well, because I'm that kind of guy and because I'm that good for you. So that was Blind Boy Fuller. We had some BB King. I've got some Buddy Guy coming up for you. And let's have a look. We will go with some Elmore James. We shall go with some Elmore James after that later on. Anyway, okay, let's get back to the news. I've just been looking at the radio chat box here. Now, as my wife mentioned in that previous interview, she has arthritis and has suffered quite badly with it for some time now, and she's got problems with the discs and everything. And some of the bright, sparkling people here in this Awake Radio chat box have been telling me about apple cider vinegar. Now, I am somebody who uses colloidal silver. I take regular vitamins. I have We've used coconut oil. I use it to maintain my beautiful youthful looks as well, because you can rub it on your skin. It's fantastic moisturiser. Don't think you've just got to cook with it, although it is good to cook with it, of course. So we use it in just about everything now. And so coconut oil, good for the brain, and has been proven to reverse some of the symptoms of Alzheimer's in some patients. Not all, because you can't make these kinds of medical claims when you're not a medical person, so I'm just passing on information that I've seen. Anyway, apple cider vinegar is a must for arthritis, and if you go along to bobbyshealthshop.co.uk, apple cider vinegar arthritis, it's turned my life around when I was diagnosed with ankylosing spondylitis, a type of chronic long-term arthritis that affects parts of the spine, including the bones, muscles, and ligaments. That's come from Jim UK. So we shall definitely be visiting that web address. In fact, I'm going to click on it now. And that's brought up that page. Got it. Right, so that means I can visit that and look at that properly later on. And it must be non-pasteurized and include a glug of it every day, and it's nature's nectar, says Jewel One. And Jewel One swears by it. Been given my dad it for the last few months, and he loves it. I'm definitely going to have to invest then. Well worth a look. You may also want to do some research into 35% food-grade hydrogen peroxide. I use it every day, and it's a miracle substance. Really good for you. Cheap as chips, so a no-brainer. And now then, let's have a look at this. Diatomaceous earth is well worth a look as well for joint pains. That's Diatomaceous is how it's been spelt, and I shall have a look into that as well. Thank you very much. You know, a lot of these common conditions which Big Pharma decide that we have to put pills and we have to have injections, which I don't, by the way. I haven't had an injection since 1999, and that doctor suffered a broken nose and black eyes and a very sore back after I put her on her backside very violently because she insisted on attempting to inject me. Now, I'm very needle phobic, and also I didn't want any vaccines. And I was put in a position where I was being held down and forcibly injected by an RAF medical doctor. And that was an experience I had in the first few days of the RAF. I should have learnt from that experience, shouldn't I? Yes, that's right. As a veteran, I was forcibly injected, or forcibly attempted to be injected in 1999. And I got my revenge in those straight away. I defended myself and used violence, which is not something I would condone or request that anybody else does. I'm not proud of it. I'm very ashamed of my actions that day, but it has to be said that, well, that's what happened. A doctor attempted to inject me and ended up with a lot of injuries. Anyway, so I've got information about apple cider. How did I get onto that? Gosh, I went off on a complete tangent there. Right, I want to pull up this next website here, and this is from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism's Covert War Project. And this is regarding Obama. More than 2,400 dead as Obama's drone campaign marks 5 years. Obama has launched over 390 covert drone strikes in its first 5 years in office. And this is from Pete Souza at the White House. 5 years ago, on January 23rd, 2009, a CIA drone flattened a house in Pakistan's tribal regions. It was the third day of Barack Obama's presidency, and this was the new commander-in-chief's first covert drone strike. Initial reports said up to 10 militants were killed, including foreign fighters, and possibly a, quote, high-value target, a successful first hit for the fledgling administration. But reports of civilian casualties began to emerge. As later reports revealed, the strike was far from a success. At least 9 civilians died, most of them from one family. There was one survivor, a 14-year-old Fahim Qureshi, but with horrific injuries, including shrapnel wounds in his stomach, a fractured skull, and a lost eye. He was as much a victim as his dead relatives, and they have a picture of him there. That's Fahim, which is Fahim Qureshi. And if you put that as a search into YouTube, you'll find a video of him telling his story. Later that day, the CIA attacked again and leveled another house. It proved another mistake, this time one that killed between 5 and 10 people, all civilians. Obama was briefed on the civilian casualties almost immediately and was understandably disturbed, Newsweek reporter Daniel Klaidman wrote later. 3 days earlier, in his inaugural address, Obama had told the world, quote, that America is a friend to each nation, and every man, woman and child who seeks a future of peace and dignity. The Pakistani government also knew civilians had been killed in the strikes. A record of the strikes made by the local political administration and published by the Bureau last year listed 9 civilians among the dead, but the government said nothing about this loss of life. Yet despite this disastrous start, the Obama administration markedly stepped up the use of drones. Since Obama's inauguration in 2009, the CIA has launched 330 strikes on Pakistan. His predecessor, President George Bush, conducted 51 strikes in 4 years. And in Yemen, Obama has opened a new front in the secret drone war. Across Pakistan, Yemen and Somalia, the Obama administration has launched more than 390 drone strikes in the 5 years since the first attack that injured Qureshi. 8 times as many were launched in the entire Bush presidency. These strikes have killed more than 2,400 people, at least 273 of them reportedly civilians. And of course, let's add in here that the British are also using drones at an incredible rate as well as the US. So we're not just criticizing the CIA here and Barry's administration. We're also criticizing the British and the French and the Germans, basically NATO. These strikes have killed more than 2,400 people. Although drone strikes under Obama's presidency have killed nearly 6 times as many people as were killed under Bush, the casualty rate, the number of people killed on average in each strike, has dropped from 8 to 6 under Obama. The civilian casualty rate has fallen too. Strikes during the Bush years killed nearly more than 3 civilians in each strike on average. This has halved under Obama, 1.43 civilians per strike on average. Do you know, when they average out some of these figures, 1.43 civilians killed per strike. Oh dear. In fact, reported civilian casualties in Pakistan have fallen sharply since 2010, with no confirmed reports of civilian casualties in 2013. The decline in civilian casualties could be because of reported improvements in drone and missile technology. Rising tensions between Pakistan and the US over the drone campaign, and greater scrutiny over the drone campaign both at home and abroad. Yeah, they can't get away with it as secretly as like they used to. The apparent change in targeting is well demonstrated by comparing a strike carried out by the Bush administration in 2006 and one 7 years later under Obama. On October 30th, 2006, at least 68 children were killed when CIA drones destroyed a madrasa, a religious school, in the Bajur area of Pakistan's tribal belt. The attack was reportedly targeting then Al-Qaeda second-in-command Ayman Zawahiri. He escaped. On November 21st last year, drones again targeted a madrasa, this time in Hango, outside the tribal regions. As many as 80 students were sleeping in the building, but the strike destroyed a specific portion of the building, just 1 or 2 rooms, and killed between 6 and 9 people. In Yemen, however, civilians continue to die in US drone strikes. Last year saw the highest civilian casualty rate since Obama first hit the country in 2009. Drones were not the first weapon the administration turned to when it started to attack the country. In December 17, 2009, a US Navy submarine launched a cluster bomb-laden cruise missile at a suspected militant camp in Al-Majira, southern Yemen. Sorry, that's Al-Majala in southern Yemen. The missile slammed into a hamlet, hitting one of the poorest tribes in Yemen. Shrapnel and fire left at least 41 civilians dead, including at least 21 children and 12 women. 5 of them were pregnant. A week earlier, President Obama had been awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. He used his acceptance speech to defend the use of force at times as not only necessary, but morally justified. He warned that negotiations cannot convince Al-Qaeda's leaders to lay down their arms. Strikes in Pakistan are carried out by the CIA, but in Yemen, the CIA and US Military Special Forces Unit Joint Special Operations Command have used various weapons, including drones and conventional jets, as well as cruise missiles, to target Al-Qaeda militants. Not forgetting, of course, that these are the same militants that are supported by the US and British secret services, and funded by them and transported up to Syria by the Royal Air Force. However, in recent years, drones have come to dominate the Obama's war in Yemen as much as in Pakistan. President Bush ordered a single drone strike in Yemen, killing 6 people in 2002. Under Obama, the CIA and the Pentagon have launched at least 58 drone strikes on the country, killing more than 281 people, including at least 24 reported civilians. Opaque operations. The escalation in the drone war has happened with almost no official transparency from the White House. It took Obama 3 years to publicly mention his use of drones. In January 2012, he said, quote, "Actually, drones have not caused a huge number of civilian casualties." He added, for the most part, they have been very precision strikes against Al-Qaeda and affiliates. In this period, Bureau records show drones reportedly killed at least 236 civilians, including 61 children. And according to a leaked CIA record of drone strikes seen by the McClatchy news agency, the US often did not know who it was killing. In the year after September 2010, at least 265 of up to 482 people were recorded as the documents as killed by drones were assessed as Afghan, Pakistani and unknown extremists. A letter written by Attorney General Eric Holder and leaked to NBC confirmed drones had killed 4 US citizens living abroad. US citizen Anwel al-Awlaki died in a missile strike in Yemen on September 30th, 2011. His 16-year-old son, Abdul Rahman, was born in Detroit and was killed in a separate strike 2 weeks later. In April 2013, a leaked Department of Justice memo outlined the administration's legal justifications for such killings. The US has the right to kill US citizens if they pose an imminent threat, it said. It added that determining a citizen poses an imminent threat does not require the United States to have clear evidence that a specific attack on US persons and interests will take place in the immediate future. Jamil Jaffer of the American Civil Liberties Union described the memo as a chilling document. I just want to read that again for you. April 2013, a leaked Department of Justice memo outlined the administration's legal justification for such killings of US citizens. The US has the right to kill US citizens if they pose an imminent threat, it said. It added that determining a citizen poses an imminent threat, quote, does not require the United States to have clear evidence that a specific attack on U.S. persons and interests will take place in the immediate future, end quote. Jamel Jaffer of the American Civil Liberties Union described the memo as a chilling document. The following month, President Obama made a major policy speech in which he codified the rules his administration must follow as it selects targets for drone strikes and special forces teams. The rules are meant to constrain the use of drones. Obama said the U.S. only carries out such attacks against individuals who pose, quote, a continuing and imminent threat to U.S. citizens, not to punish individuals. Obama acknowledged drone strikes had killed civilians, saying, for me and those in my chain of command, those deaths will haunt us as long as we live. And he added, before any strike is taken, there must be a near certainty that no civilians will be killed or injured, the highest standard we can set. However, Bureau analysis shows more people were killed in Pakistan and Yemen in the 6 months after the speech than the 6 months before, and the casualty rate also rose over the same period. In 2013, there were no confirmed civilian casualties in Pakistan, the first year of the drone campaign that this was the case. But in Yemen, the year ended with mass civilian casualties. On December 12th, JSOC drones attacked a convoy taking a bride to her wedding. The attack destroyed several vehicles and flying shrapnel killed 15 civilians. It was the biggest single loss of civilian life from a US strike for more than a year. The Yemeni government initially claimed Al-Qaeda militants were killed, but the Yemeni government quickly negotiated reparations with the families of the victims, sending them $140,000 and 100 rifles. The US has not commented on the strike, but in an unprecedented move, Washington is carrying out an investigation. That was a report on the covert war on terror from the Bureau of Investigative Journalism. I found something that's out today, and it's fiction, but it has some very chilling truths in it. It's a trailer for a film. Have a listen to this.
What if I told you that even the worst neighborhood in America could be made completely safe? How do I know this? Because it's happening right now in every country in the world but this one. It is great to see American machines helping to promote peace abroad. So then tell me, why can't we use these machines here at home? Why is America so robophobic?
We need to give Americans a product they can love, a figure they can rally behind.
We can't put a machine on the street.
Forget machines. They want a product with a conscience. Something that knows what it feels like to be human. Give your mom a kiss.
My baby.
Too slow, boy. We're gonna put a man inside a machine.
Time to wake him up.
Make him more tactical. Let's go with black.
Quality control, EM208 versus Tin Man.
We are going to make a lot of money.
It's coming.
Gonna play good cop, bad cop?
Bad cop, RoboCop.
He's undoing what we did to him. Thank you for your cooperation.
That's the second trailer for the film RoboCop that is out very soon later this year in theatres. 12th of February 2014. I do apologise, it's written the US way. So it's the 12th of February 2014 and not the 2nd of December 2014. I do apologise. But yeah, there we go. So the point is being made. Fiction is reflecting reality rather than... Yeah, reality is reflecting fiction. Get myself a little confused there. But there you go, you see. We are being shown the future now. We know that Google has purchased several companies that are making autonomous robots already, and DARPA is well underway with its human analog machine. And all these things are there, you know, the cheetah robot that can run at up to 30 miles an hour, and the walking robot that can track humans and can walk over all kinds of rough ground, and the large human-esque robot which DARPA has also developed. And the last photograph I saw of it, it was dressed in an NBC suit, a nuclear biological chemical suit with a gas mask on, boots and goggles, and gloves. And for all intents and purposes, it could have been a human soldier. It was actually a machine underneath. And watch the film, watch the new RoboCop remake, and you'll see what's planned and what's already in the pipeline. Drones is something that I've talked about quite a lot, because I don't live that far away from where the UK drones are controlled from, where they're piloted from, which is at RAF Waddington, and that's 15 Squadron. I'm not breaking any official secrets, it's already out there. And Hollywood has been showing us for ages, educational purpose sometimes, films. That's right, Joel One, they are. And it's worrying, really, that, sometimes we watch these fictional films and we discover that they're not fictional, really. That these things are actually reflecting truth. And I mean, I just look at UK aircraft design and US aircraft design as well. And when you think that the F-111 stealth fighter, we first saw that in the 90s, and that had been on the drawing board and had been test piloted decades before. And the aircraft that we have now as our primary air defense aircraft, the Typhoon, the Eurofighter, that was drawn back in the late 70s, 80s, and it's taken that long for it to come come into service. So one has to ask, what's being drawn now? What's being put on the computer, on the computer screen now? We know that autonomous drones are out there. They are getting smaller. The British Army is already using a system called Dragonfly, which is two small surveillance drones, which currently will sit in the palm of your hand. They're probably 2 to 3 inches in length, and they have a flight time of 20 minutes and are used to observe rough ground and compounds in Afghanistan. And the soldiers use those, they charge them up, program it, it's fully autonomous, it gets programmed, it gets sent out, and they watch the live feed on a camera from the screen. And then when that drone returns, they have a second one which they send out to maintain observation. And once again, nothing secret, it's all out there in the public domain. You just have to go looking for it, that's all, because it's obviously not going to be that well broadcast. But they release these little nuggets, they release these little squirrels to distract you away, which is what's been happening with the recent child abuse cases that have been going on here in the UK. Dave Lee Travis, Jimmy Savile et al. And they are being we're being allowed to see those because that will deflect us, they think, that will deflect us away from the real criminals who are in Parliament, high government, high society, Buckingham Palace, and that entire extended family. And I'm going to play you a little piece now, which is from a Dispatches program, and this is about the Cyril Smith.
This is a story 50 years in the making. The MP for Rochdale, Sir Cyril Smith, was a political superstar. When he died, senior colleagues in the Liberal Democrat Party lined up to pay him tribute. But Cyril Smith was a paedophile. We've talked to the boys, now men, whom he physically and sexually assaulted, the police officers determined to bring him to justice, and the friends whose trust he betrayed. Unlike Jimmy Savile and others, Smith was investigated right at the beginning. But thanks to a devastating mixture of power and politics, his accusers were ignored and then others were abused. Tonight they will finally be heard. This is Cyril Smith in the 1970s, at the height of his political power, a major national figure. Chief Whip of the Liberal Party at the very moment when the Liberals held the balance of power in British politics.
I think that we've proved tonight that given the right man in the right seat, the Liberals can win.
A sort of jovial juggernaut, he was 6'3" and weighed in at 29 stone.
Cyril and I just doing a bit of aerobics. Right, now jumping up and down and putting your arms like this.
Cyril Smith, he was one of those rare politicians who was known to people who had no interest in politics and didn't care about politics. I mean, a bit like Boris Johnson today. He was a kind of, a poor northern working class Boris Johnson, if one can imagine such a thing.
I've always been built for comfort, not speed,
Yeah.
But the truth about Smith, that he was a paedophile, was almost erased from the record. When he died in 2010, the rich tributes gave no hint of the truth.
He was a big man, Cyril, but I think of him as a big-hearted man, because in everything he did, he gave 105%.
Everybody in Rochdale truly, adored him. I mean, this really was quite literally a larger-than-life figure, and he will be sorely, sorely missed.
The image of Cyril Smith that his colleagues promoted is that of a man of the people, who lived in a tiny Rochdale terrace and devoted himself to the needs of his community. What the party have said less about is his private life.
So then I was stood there naked and towards him. He looked me up and down, and he ran his hands all up and down my thighs and inside my legs and touched my private parts.
Later police reports would describe how Smith would ask his young victims about their sexual experience and whether they'd started masturbating.
It wasn't right. I know it wasn't right, but I couldn't do nothing about it.
Many people knew about the allegations against Smith years ago, but he was not stopped. He went on abusing.
We were let down, and because we were let down, it's carried on and on and on. And it shouldn't have carried on and on.
Unbelievably, it's almost 50 years since Smith abused Kevin and many others. But now Dispatches has finally got hold of the original case file. This shows the police were more than ready to prosecute him. Smith appears guilty of numerous offences
of indecent assault. He used his unique position to indulge in a sordid series of indecent episodes with young boys towards whom he had a special responsibility.
But the prosecution never happened. The story started here in Rochdale, a once great cotton town fallen on hard times. It was a town in which Cyril Smith loomed large as a man of power and influence. But in a chilling echo of Jimmy Savile, Smith hid his abuse of children behind the smokescreen of working tirelessly for children.
I've assisted considerably the formation of a number of Rochdale charities, Rochdale Childer, for example, which I founded, and I'm now chairman of. Has assisted hundreds of deprived children in Rochdale.
As a town councillor and head of the Children's Committee, Smith helped to set up Cambridge House in 1962, an independently run hostel for the benefit of apprentices and boys who would otherwise be homeless. "50 years ago, it housed up to 20 vulnerable and needy lads. Young men and boys whom Smith went on to abuse. Some are now speaking on camera for the first time, but not all want to be identified.
He started then to touch me between the legs. He touched my private parts. He played about with certain parts of me. I was just like a rabbit like in the headlights. I didn't know what to do. I just lay there.
Ron Neal was just 11 years old, 4'6", and only 5 stone when he was disciplined by an irate Smith.
I got hit in the face, lost a couple of teeth, got whacked on the back of the head, ended up being taken to a local hospital where I received a couple of stitches. The person who took me to the hospital said, "You better not say anything about what's happened, we'll tell them that you've tripped and had a fall."
It seems, therefore, that some of the staff at Cambridge House were suspicious of Smith's activities. One even advised Kevin Griffiths how best to avoid Smith's attentions.
She says, "Don't worry, Kevin. It's the best thing to do. Don't come back into the home between the hours of 9 and 10 o'clock at night. As Mr. Smith finishes his council meetings then."
She was warning you to keep away from Cyril.
Yeah, she was really, yeah.
The police report makes clear that Cyril Smith was by now in the habit of visiting Cambridge House in the evenings, administering fake medicals and corporal punishment, putting boys over his knee and beating their naked backsides. Quite early on, there was one man who did hear about what was going on. He was Rochdale's new and very young Chief Children's Officer, Lyndon Price.
The social worker came to see me to express concern that Cyril Smith administered the punishment at the home. I already realised that the line between physical punishment of that nature and sexual assault and abuse was a very thin one. I knew what I had to do. I'd have to go to the police. So I went and saw the Chief Constable. His name was Patrick Ross, and he listened quite attentively to what I said, and he said, "Right, I will make inquiries and investigate the matter further." So I came away.
This was the first opportunity to stop Smith, but nothing happened. Clearly a decision was made not to proceed.
I was left wondering why had this decision been taken? And I thought, well, perhaps it's been thought that they aren't credible witnesses. And
I'll stop you there. So you didn't think maybe Cyril Smith has no case to answer?
Oh, no.
You were satisfied that he was doing something wrong?
Yes. It's a strange thing, even in boys who've offended or been in trouble, there are some things they don't tell lies about.
Looking at the original investigation files, it's hard to know why nothing came of Price's request to Chief Constable Ross. But in the documents we've got hold of, the police do admit
it is quite feasible that Mr. Ross would keep it to himself because of the status of the man involved.
That was 1965, and not long after, Cambridge House closed. A year later, Cyril Smith was appointed Mayor of Rochdale, and from the powers that be, he received an MBE for services to youth. But in 1969, another complaint was made against Cyril Smith, MBE, and this time the police did start an official investigation, but they quickly ran into trouble. Smith was rather too close for comfort. It was all to do with the layout of the town hall. At the time, he was running the Children's Committee from his office at that end of the building, while the police were stationed at this end. News of their investigation evidently came as a shock.
That night, our door was flung open, and Cyril came thumping in. White. He was absolutely white.
Eileen Kershaw had been a fellow councillor and one of Smith's closest friends. He turned to her when he discovered that someone had reported him to the police.
as soon as I saw him, I knew there was something wrong, and I said, what's the matter? And he said, he's reported me to the police for interfering with lads at Cambridge House. He says, he's got me involved with the police.
What did he tell you about what he was accused of?
Didn't tell us anything. I didn't know.
Were you suspicious?
I knew it was something sexual, but I didn't know what.
Back inside the town hall, which the Rochdale police shared with the Rochdale councillors, this first investigation was handled by Chief Inspector Derek Wheater, and Smith used that proximity. He clearly thought the best form of defence was to attack.
He did go in, throwing his weight about. He says, I've been into the police station, he says, and I've challenged them. He says, I've told them, tell me what it's all about, or leave me alone. He says, I've frightened them. That was him, full of, bravado and bluster.
But it wasn't all bluster. The police officer's notes reveal the backing Smith got from some important people in the town. And you can see here references to veiled threats and innuendos from Henry Howarth, leader of Rochdale's Liberals.
The prosecution can do no good at all, and the backlash will have unfortunate repercussions for the police force and the town of Rochdale.
To avoid this kind of thing, Wheater spoke to a colleague on the county force, Jack Tasker of Lancashire CID.
Twice, whilst he was a Rochdale Borough officer, he had made investigations about Cyril Smith. Both times, these investigations had been blocked, stopped. He thought Lancashire officers, not known in Rochdale at all, may proceed better because people wouldn't know who we were. So he gave us a list of the people at Cambridge House that had made complaints, their home addresses, and away we went.
Jack Tasker ran it as a discreet investigation. Soon he was confident enough to interview Cyril Smith under caution.
We spoke to him, we put the allegations to him. He denied the sexual content and said away, and he said, well, there might have been a little bit of chastisement for things he'd done wrong. And we asked him to explain that. He said, a smack. That was the type of thing he did. And at the end...
Did he admit to smacking their bottoms?
He didn't, no, he wouldn't admit to smacking bottoms, no.
From what you've said, either Cyril Smith was lying, or the 8 victims at Cambridge House.
Were lying, yes, yeah. And the odds 8 to 1, and having interviewed also the 8 people, I didn't think they were lying.
Tasker was convinced there was a criminal case to answer, and he was about to conclude his investigation and submit a report, when 2 senior officers arrived at his office.
They wanted to know where all the statements were, any paper, anything that belonged to the inquiry, they wanted putting on the desk now. They made it quite clear that as far as we were concerned, the inquiry was finished. You'll take no further part, you'll take no more inquiries into Cyril Smith. That is it. End of.
For decades, Jack Tasker believed this was political interference. But in fact, it seems that the case was deemed so sensitive that it should be taken over by a distinguished detective superintendent, Jack Watson. The police would eventually conclude that Smith
used his unique position to indulge in a sordid series of indecent episodes with young boys towards whom he had a special responsibility.
But as Watson began his investigation, Smith kept in touch with boys like Kevin Griffiths, continuing to insinuate himself into their lives.
Elmore James, it hurts me too. That's why I report these things. That's why I talk about people like Harriet Harman. That's why I played that Dispatcher's piece about Cyril Smith, because these terrible crimes, they hurt me too. They should hurt all of us. We should all be touched, and we should all be impacted by these terrible, terrible crimes. Before she became an MP, Harriet Harman was the legal officer in the late 1970s of the National Council for Civil Liberties. When Harman joined the NCCL in 1978, the Paedophile Information Exchange had already been affiliated for 3 years. Another group, Paedophile Action for Liberation, a gay liberation front offshoot, had also been affiliated to the NCCL until it was absorbed by the Paedophile Information Exchange. PI, which campaigned for adults to have sex legally with children, only broke off its relationship with the NCCL when it went undercover in 1982, the same year that Harriet Harman left her NCCL post to become a Member of Parliament for Peckham. So when the Protection of Children Bill was put through Parliament in order to tighten the laws on child pornography by banning indecent images of under 16s, Harriet Harman was at the forefront of the NCCL response. Signed by Harriet Harman in April 1978, the NCCL's formal response to the government proposals to reform a sex law dubbed a Lolita's Charter was unbelievable. Harman argued that, quote, childhood sexual experiences willingly engaged in with an adult result in no identifiable damage. Although this harm may be of a somewhat speculative nature, where participation falls short of physical assault, it is nonetheless justifiable to restrain activities by a photographer which involve placing children under the age of 14 or arguably 16 in sexual situations. We suggest that the term indecent be qualified as follows. A photograph or film shall not, for this purpose, be considered indecent A, by reason only that the model is in a state of undress, whether complete or partial, unless it is proved, or it is to be inferred from the photograph or film that the making of the photograph or film might reasonably be expected to have caused the model physical harm or pronounced psychological or emotional disorder. Absolutely disgraceful and disgusting. I'm going to move on from that though, because one can get stuck into these obsessions and stuck into these stories, and it can damage you. And that's something that but this child abuse is something that I've investigated for a while and will keep doing. Moving on though. Azerbaijan and Turkey can set up integrated identification friend or foe system in aviation and air defence spheres. The system will allow air defence systems of both countries to automatically determine aircraft and drones belonging to other countries. At present, the relevant discussions are underway. During his visit to Turkey in December last year, Azerbaijani Defence Minister Colonel General Zakir Hasanov focused on this issue. After the agreements, Azerbaijan and Turkey will install the identification friend or foe system designed by Aselsan company in all aircraft. This means they can identify US drones when they're coming over. And that ties into the drone story that I was talking about just before. Timeline of key events in the Ukraine protests. This is from the Washington Post. Kiev, Ukraine. 3 protesters died during Wednesday's confrontation between police and demonstrations in the Ukrainian capital of Kiev, further escalating the 2-month-old protest movement over the government decision to ditch its cooperation deal with the European Union for closer ties with Moscow. So let's bear in mind that according to this, the protests, where we've witnessed upwards of 300,000 people out on the streets, is because the Ukrainian government has decided to move its allegiance, if you like, towards Moscow and not the EU. Here are the key dates that have shaped the protests. November 21st, President Viktor Yanukovych, his cabinet announces that they are abandoning an agreement that would strengthen ties with the EU, instead seek closer cooperation with Moscow. November 30th, police launch a brutal attack on protesters, detaining 35. Images of protesters blooded by police truncheons spread quickly and galvanized public support for the demonstrators. A demonstration on December 1st attracted around 300,000 people, the largest protest in Kiev since the Orange Revolution in 2004. December 17, Russian President Vladimir Putin announces that Moscow will buy $15 billion worth of Ukrainian government bonds and allow for a sharp cut in the price Ukrainians will have to pay for Russian natural gas. Putin and Yanukovych claimed that there were no conditions attached to the agreement, which did not require Ukraine to join a Russian-led free trade pact. January 22nd, 2 protesters die after being hit with live ammunition, and the third after a fall during a confrontation between police and demonstrators manning barricades, the first protest deaths. And that's from AP, the Associated Press, and as reported in the Washington Post. If we go over to rferl.org, Russian Free Europe Radio Liberty, that's rferl.org. They have been running a live blog, and I will just quickly update that before I read it to you to ensure that I'm getting the latest from them. And they lead with the 3 protesters who've died during the continued unrest. The latest they have here is from Glenn Cates, and it was at 10:45. At least 2 people have died from gunshot wounds. Another activist who disappeared yesterday from Kiev clinic was identified by a relative in a suburban Kiev morgue. The US Embassy in Ukraine announced that it had revoked visas for some officials involved in November and December violence and condemned the violence that occurred early Wednesday morning. Pitched conflict between riot police and protesters continued overnight, as protesters maintained huge fires along their barricades using mostly burnt tires. The 3 main opposition leaders met earlier in the day with Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych. Later, in speeches at Independence Square, they said they demanded he call early elections. Opposition leader Arseniy Yatsenyuk, I do apologise, gave him 24 hours. Opposition leaders are expected to meet with Yanukovych again on Thursday afternoon. The head of the Udar party has called for a general strike to begin at noon as a way of demonstrating that opposition to the president is serious. And that was the latest from Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. Lots going on across the world, lots which initially you would think, well, that's just impacting them in their country. However, the repercussions of these demonstrations and protests and these allegiance changes are going to impact us here in the West just as much as they will in the Ukraine and Russia, because this is going to be what we're seeing is the building of stronger coalitions again with Russia, and the European Soviet is being melded together in the European Union. We're going to see the Soviet Union as we knew it. That's reforming. We are seeing these unions building across the world, and slowly but surely they're coming together. And this will lead inevitably to conflict. And I hate to be the one to say it, but I think Israel is going to play a major part in it. And I think it's going to be the centre of a lot of it. And for anybody who is of the Christian faith out there, you know how important that particular statement is in the end times prophecies that are that you can read about in Revelation. So let's have a look what else is going on around the independent news media quickly before I read something to you that I think is important. And it's a bit of history, it's a bit of fiction, but it also resonates strongly with reality today. From the 21st Century Wire, Ukrainian protesters encircled the US Embassy in shouting, "Yankees go home." London pushed for water cannons because austerity measures will lead to protests. We're going to see water cannon used on the streets of a mainland UK city for the first time this year. Third World USA, an oil spill in your own neighbourhood. The US has 2.5 million miles of pipelines carrying oil, with hundreds of ruptures per year. Syria peace summit turns into regime change ambush staged by US and its allies. Curveball becomes Caesar as the West keeps on nudging for regime change in Syria. And let's just bear in mind that 3 years ago, remember, Bashir al-Assad, whilst he was not the best regime leader, he wasn't attacking anybody. He wasn't a threat to anyone. Although others may have perceived differently. Syria, the country that never existed. It's like Dr. Frankenstein complaining because his creation is still not housebroken. Over at the Community Press Group, Reality Bites Radio, Thursday the 16th of January, Neil had the guest Peter Parker and Walter Graham on the health effects of Wi-Fi in schools. The Community Press Group and the Ministry of Health will be working on a significant project to attempt to have Wi-Fi removed from UK schools. I have been and bought myself a Wi-Fi microwave meter, and I'm going to be checking out the Wi-Fi signals around my home and see what levels they're at, and I'll film that and I'll probably put it on my YouTube channel. Formula One, a hive of coincidences. Make no bones about the fact that this is a largely speculative article. This is unsurprising, as it's about Formula One, which is renowned for off-track activities which leave the observer with the feeling that there is more behind the scenes, and this refers to the tragic injuries that have happened to Michael Schumacher whilst skiing. And if you look at the diagram there, you can see that Schumacher's route was straight through the middle of a very rocky area, whilst the piste that he should have been on splits and goes either side of it. So how come he ended up in the middle? Sky News and the BBC are not interested in asking real questions on paedophilia, referring to the information that I was talking about earlier. When major news outlets send FOI requests, Freedom of Information Act requests, you would think they'd have the intelligence to ask the pertinent questions. Unfortunately, Sky News and the BBC seem to be lacking in the intelligence department. And domestic violence and positive arrest policies. Is it time to take a closer look at positive arrest policies? This was something that I experienced as a police officer. The policy was that when you attended a domestic dispute, which involved a man and a woman, whether a married couple or partners, you always arrested the man. That was the policy. That's what you did. Whether he was the victim or not, you arrested him and took him away from the situation. So the immediate implication was that he was the troublemaker and he was the criminal, whatever the situation. And that was the policy that was that we carried out and that we undertook for many years. And it is something that needs to be looked at, because each situation needs to be weighed on its merits and not on the fact that, not on the sexuality of the, or the gender of the participants. Okay, we're into the last 10 minutes of the show, and coming up on the hour, we have Rick. And he's going to be ready to go on the hour. Good to know that you're there, Rick. And stay tuned for Rick's show coming up on the hour of midnight here in the UK. Just a quick note as well. I will be taking a second slot on Awake Radio and Shaziz, and that will be at 10 p.m. on Mondays as well as 10 p.m. on Thursdays. So if you can join me then, it'd be great to have you along. I want to spend the last few minutes of the show, I'll finish on a piece of music, but I want to finish on reading this from some study notes about A Brave New World. Because I think whilst this piece of fiction, as it was written in 1932 by Aldous Huxley, I think we'll also see that there is a lot of reality as we see it today. The Brave New World is partly a statement of ideas expressed by characters with no more depth than cartoon characters, and only partly a story with a plot. The first 3 chapters present most of the important ideas or themes of the novel. The director of Hatcheries and Conditioning explains that this utopia breeds people to order, artificially fertilizing a mother's eggs to create babies that grow in bottles. They are not born, but decanted. Everyone belongs to one of 5 classes, from the alphas, the most intelligent, to the epsilons, morons bred to do the dirty jobs that nobody else wants to do. The lower classes are multiplied by a budding process that can create up to 96 identical clones and produce over 15,000 brothers and sisters from a single ovary. All the babies are conditioned physically and chemically in the bottle, and psychologically after birth, to make them happy citizens of the society with both a liking and an aptitude for the work they will do. One psychological conditioning technique is hypnopedia, or teaching people while they sleep. Not teaching facts or analysis, but planting suggestions that will make people behave in certain ways. The director also makes plain that sex is a source of happiness, a game people play with anyone who pleases them. The controller, one of the 10 men who run the world, explains some of the more profound principles on which the utopia is based. One is that history is bunk, and the society limits people's knowledge of the past, so they will not be able to compare the present with anything that might make them want to change the present. Another principle is that people should have no emotions, particularly no painful emotions. Blind happiness is necessary for stability. One of the things that guarantees happiness is a drug called Soma, which calms you down and gets you high, but never gives you a hangover. Another is the feelies, movies that reach your sense of touch as well as your sight and hearing. After Huxley presents these themes in the first 3 chapters, the story begins. Bernard Marx, an alpha of the top class, is on the verge of falling in love with Lenina Crown, a woman who works in the embryo room of the hatchery. Lenina has been dating Henry Foster, a hatchery scientist. Her friend Fanny nags her because she hasn't seen any other men for 4 months. Lenina likes Bernard, but doesn't fall in love with him. Falling in love is a sin in this world in which one has sex with everyone else and is a happy, conforming citizen of the utopia. Bernard is neither happy nor conforming. He's a bit odd. For one thing, he's small for an alpha. In a world where every member of the same caste is alike, he likes to treasure his differences from his fellows, but he lacks the courage to fight for his right to be an individual. In contrast, in his friend Helmholtz, Watson, successful in sports, sex and community activities, but openly dissatisfied because instead of writing something beautiful and powerful, his job is to turn out propaganda. Bernard attends a solidarity service at the Fordian religion, a parody of Christianity as practiced in England in the 1920s. It culminates in a sexual orgy, but he doesn't feel the true rapture experienced by the other 11 members of his group. Bernard then takes Lenina to visit a savage reservation in North America. While signing his permit to go, the director tells Bernard how he visited the same reservation as a young man, taking a young woman from London who disappeared and was presumed dead. He then threatens Bernard with exile to Iceland because Bernard is a nonconformist. He doesn't gobble up pleasure in his leisure time like an infant. At the reservation, Bernard and Lenina meet John, a handsome young savage who, Bernard soon realizes, is the son of the director. Clearly, the woman the director had taken to the reservation long ago had become pregnant as a result of an accident that the citizens of Utopia would consider obscene. John has a fantasy picture of Utopia from his mother's tales and a knowledge of Shakespeare that he mistakes for a guide to reality. Bernard gets permission from the controller to bring John and Linda, his mother, back to London. The director had called a public meeting to announce Bernard's exile, but by greeting the director as lover and father respectively, Linda and John turn him into an obscene joke. Bernard stays and becomes the centre of attention of all London because he is, in effect, John's guardian, and everybody wants to meet the savage. Linda goes into a permanent soma trance after her years of exile on the reservation. John is taken to see all the attractions of New World society and he doesn't like them, but he enjoys arguing with Helmut Holtz about them and about Shakespeare. Lenina has become popular because she is thought to be sleeping with the savage. Everyone envies her and wants to know what it's like. But in fact, while she wants to sleep with John, he refuses because he too has fallen in love with her. And he has taken from Shakespeare the old-fashioned idea that lovers should be pure. Not understanding this, she finally comes to his apartment and takes her clothes off. He throws her out, calling her a prostitute, because he thinks she's immoral, even though he wants her desperately. John then learns that his mother is dying. The hospital illustrates the Utopia's approach to death, which includes trying to completely eliminate grief and pain. When John goes to visit Linda, he's devastated. His display of grief frightens children, being taught that death is a pleasant and natural process. John grows so angry that he tries to bring the Utopia back to what he considers sanity and morality by disrupting the daily distribution of soma to lower caste Delta workers. That leads to a riot. John, Bernard and Helmholtz are arrested. The three then confront the controller, who explains more of the Utopia's principles. Their conversation reveals that the Utopia achieves its happiness, giving up science, art, religion, and other things that we prize in the real world. The controller sends Bernard to Iceland, after all, and Helmholtz to the Falkland Islands. He keeps John in England, but John finds a place where he can lead a hermit's life, complete with suffering. His solitude is invaded by utopians who want to see him suffer, as though he is a sideshow spectacle. When Lenina joins the mob, he kills himself.